welcome to Sue Archbold from the UK. And I understand there is wonderful weather everywhere. So we just hope we will have many people. And Sue just told us that they have, what was it, 35 degrees in the UK in May. So thank you, Sue, for joining us, because when the weather is like this, people tend to do something different and don't sit at the laptop. So I'm also very, very happy for everybody who is joining us this afternoon. And as we just said, we have participation from many, many countries. It looks like 15 countries. And when we have a look at the chat, we saw already Paraguay, we saw Spain, we see Serbia, we see Argentina, we see Kyrgyzstan, and Germany, of course, we have Lehnhradt with us. So Sue is, of course, a very well-known speaker, and I can say worldwide, and she's traveling and traveling. I just admire her energy. It is amazing, I must say, but I know that you and me, sometimes we think, oh, this is getting a little bit maybe too much, but then there are wonderful events and we finally decide we will continue. So Sue, very, very welcome, and I will not explain who you are because everybody hopefully had a look at the invitation and could see what Sue did in the past and what she's doing now. And I must say this KICA organization is fantastic, and it gets people together, and the big thing or the outstanding factor is that the KICA has people, members and participants in the conferences from very different professions, and that makes it such a vivid community. Sue will join us today as the speaker, and she will present a very interesting topic, listening to parents. And of course, I'm happy that Sue has so much, or she places a lot of emphasis on the role of parents, because if I may remember my late husband, who always said the success, so to say, of cochlear implantation, it's 10% is the high quality of the implant and the professional surgery, and 90% is rehabilitation, the role of parents, and of course, the role of experts like Sue. And Sue is listening to parents. But before we start the presentation, please, can we have the next slide? Because, as you all know, Sue Archbold will present in English. And I can imagine we have some participants who do not understand English well enough, so they prefer to have a translation. And Katarina, our team member in the Lehnhradt Foundation, she will explain to you how to activate the automatic transcription.
Welcome everyone. For live translation, please click the caption TT of your screen. A small menu will open. First, set the speaking language to English and translation to Russian or another language. Добрый день всем участникам. Чтобы включить живые субтитры с переводом, пожалуйста, на значок субтитры на экране откроется небольшое меню. Сначала выберите язык общения на английском, а затем язык перевода на русский или другой удобный вам язык. Спасибо. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katarina. And I would like to encourage everybody, when you try to do this, you activate the transcription. If there is a problem, please type it into the chat, so we will try to help you. And here we have again the summary, the key highlights of this presentation, and I will not lose time in reading this to you, but I would like to welcome Sue again. So please, Sue, you can start your presentation. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, Monica. It's a real privilege to be here and to share what you're doing at PORA and the amazing work. And we all admire you for your energy and your enthusiasm and leadership in this field. So I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. And welcome to everybody, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are around the world. Parents, if we look around the world, in fact, everywhere you go, it's parents who've been driving forward cochlear implantation. It certainly was here in the UK. So listening to parents, I ask, do we always listen to parents? Do we give them and support them in the absolutely vital role that they have? I'm just start this with this very special parent. Here she is, Rebecca. She was implanted at 3 at Nottingham, one of our first parents. And there's her little boy, Fergal, who you're going to meet later, implanted at 7 months old. So listening to parents, very important. And at the beginning of the Nottingham implant programme, we listened to her parents. But just before I start about parents, I want to just put a personal note as a teacher of the deaf. I was the teacher of the deaf for the first child in the country who had a cochlear implant, and that was a challenging role. But the changes of me from this, that picture isn't me, but it could have been when the children had to sit around wearing headphones. One of the advantages was they couldn't move, they couldn't move very far, but one wonders what they were hearing. But to this, where 2 profoundly deaf children are sharing a book. Now, as one who believes passionately in literature for all children, this was not possible before cochlear implantation. It's just amazing still when I see children sharing a book with each other or with their parents. So that change was huge and unforeseen. And what drove the change? The advent of cochlear implantation and useful hearing for the first time. But, I always say this, there's always a but in life. What stays the same? I just ask you, and I would like some answers if that's possible from anybody who cares to do so. Is this successful communication? And if it is, how do you know? Is anybody going to give me an answer? Anybody? Do something in the chat room. Maybe somebody likes to kick it off. No?
Well, I kicked it off and I said yes, and there's eye contact, and already there's another person, Ali, saying making eye contact and smiling.
And smiling. Do they look happy in each other's company? Yes, I believe they do. Are they looking at each other? Are they having fun? Are they relaxed? Do you know if they're deaf or hearing? Actually, you don't know if he's deaf or hearing. You can see he's not wearing hearing aids, of course, but he might have an implant on the other side. But actually, the basics of communication are the same for all children. And now cochlear implants make that relationship possible, that successful, relaxed communication. And that's also the foundation of children's behavior and how they feel about themselves. Even when he's so small, he's feeling valued by his mum. Now, people say, you know, we don't just listen with our ears, we listen with our brains. And once when I said that, somebody stopped me and said, no, Sue, we listen with our hearts. And she had a point, because communication is about more than words. It's about more than some interaction between our brains. It also involves our hearts, our communication, and how we feel about people, particularly for parents and their children. Well, Lally last month talked to us about parent behaviours linked to strong outcomes. She gave a wonderful presentation with many videos to show us about responsive turn-taking, following the child's lead, contingent responses on what the child says, rich linguistic input, repetition, facilitative language techniques. Well, you saw this little boy before, and Lally also showed a very special dad. Well, I'm going to show you another special dad. And there's Fergal, implanted at 7 months, as I said. Here he is, 2 years, 9 months. His language levels are above his age. I want you to have a look at this conversation. It's got subtitles too. There's Dad and Fergal playing. Who's in charge of this conversation?
Why am I the black? Am I Black Spidey? Who's the normal Spider-Man?
Or Spidey.
Okay, right. Where are the baddies gone though?
Oh,
Okay, are you gonna go get them?
you come with me.
Okay.
So who's in charge of that conversation? I don't think, yes, Monica, are you going to tell me?
For the moment, I can't see anything in the chat. So please, what do you think? Type into the chat if you have any idea who you think is the driving. Here's again, the child, says Ali.
Yes, indeed, because he's valued in the communication and he's driving it. And I've got another question for you now. I want to know what supported this great progress that he had. What enabled it to happen? Any ideas? And do please put them in the chat, and Monica will be able to tell me because I can't see the chat when I'm in full view.
I'm watching. No.
Or you can speak up, maybe.
Yes, or somebody can also raise hand and or switch on microphone and say something. No?
What enabled that to happen? That excellent progress, where he's got better than age appropriate language. Well,
I can only imagine that when I see the father, how he talks to his child, that he did this from the very beginning, and therefore the child had the chance to develop even faster than a normal hearing child. And here we have input from Sue Lewis, listening adults, exclamation mark, as well as taking adults, maybe talking adults. And then Ali says that he was implanted early and early intervention and support. Yes, and Sue says she meant talking, the adults to talk a lot. Yes.
Thank you, Sue.
What did Maura Clark say? They need more of the normal.
The normal, yes, and yes, Margaret Tate used to say, we need to make the normal happen. And if you asked Dad and Mum what they did, they said they did what they did with her is their hearing child, but more of it. So if there's any more, Monica, that's fine. What supported this? Clearly, early implantation in the first year of life. Wearing the processor, that may seem obvious, but it doesn't always happen. Regular programming suitable for his child. Now, interestingly, he didn't have intensive therapy sessions. They chose not to do that to provide everything at home. Good cognition. Sometimes we don't think about that, but, you know, good brain power certainly helps. Interactive parenting style, books and stories at home, music groups, going to a mainstream nursery class with other children. Oh, sorry, I've got early implantation twice. And I will say a talkative sister who delighted in her role as a teacher to her brother.
And we have input from Lorraine, and she says early consistent device use as well as early implantation. Yes.
Exactly. And sometimes we don't remember that. First things first, we talk about early practice and so on. But if the device isn't programmed appropriately, and if it's not worn and used properly and effectively, then there's no point in talking to him, basically. So wearing the processor, and that family made sure that the mainstream nursery class knew exactly how to use the device. So don't wait to communicate. And that little one there isn't waiting to communicate. He's off already. And as Lally told us, early communications provide the foundation for language development. Good communication is essential for all aspects of the child's development, a holistic development. Good communicators are more likely to be good talkers, and good communicators are more likely to be resilient and to be able to advocate for themselves. Little Fergal is certainly able to advocate for himself. And parents are key, as Lally showed us. Jerry O'Donoghue once said, the most important thing you do in life is choose your parents. Not given to us all, but I suggest that Fergal chose quite wisely. So let's start at the beginning and let's think about the parent's journey with a deaf child. And usually they haven't expected to have a deaf child. The vast majority are born to parents who had no expectation of a deaf child.
Is it 90% so that are born in hearing families?
Yes, it's 95%.
95.
So, yes, and they typically aren't expecting. Suddenly, how many professionals do parents meet that they had never even heard about? They'd never heard what an audiologist was before. If you ask people on the street, what does an audiologist do? They don't know. These terms are very familiar to us, but they're not to new parents. What about the new language they need to learn? All the terminology that are familiar to us, but not to them. A whole new vocabulary. So just think of a parent listening to this. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, but I'm afraid our results show that Anne has a significant hearing loss. In other words, she's a little bit deaf. The cause of this is probably that she was born prematurely and had very high levels of jaundice. The loss is probably not going to get better, and we'll need to fit her with some hearing aids. I'm sure if we get the aids on early, she'll do very well. And because we've discovered the hearing loss in time, she has every chance of developing good speech and language. Do you have any questions for me at this stage? Well, all Mr. and Mrs. Jones heard was deaf. They didn't hear anything else. They certainly haven't any questions because they don't know what they don't know, and they don't have no idea what to ask. I want you to listen to this parent. It's the impact of what professionals say. And for the professionals in the group, we need to remember that parents just remember everything that we say is really important and how we say it. Now, these parents were suspicious about hearing at 6 weeks, but they weren't believed. They were not listened to. And then their child was tested at 8 months. I want you to listen and to listen to the feelings and listen to her, especially at the end.
We went at 6 weeks and said, 6-week checkup, is there a hearing test? We think there's a problem. Well, why do you think there's a problem? Don't know, just think there's a problem. And we went for a test and they said he had a low response to high frequencies, which meant absolutely, we walked out of there like, what? But of course, you don't feel confident enough to ask these questions because you're new to it all. And we just walked out thinking, oh, okay then. And then 7.5 months, he had a brainstem test and they said, oh, it says we thought he's profoundly deaf. And it was like hitting a brick wall. And when you said that, the first thing I thought was, every night when I've told him I've loved him, he didn't hear me.
Did you hear what she said? Every night when she told him she loved him, he didn't hear. Sorry. And David Lutterman that you just saw there, he suggests some feelings may follow the diagnosis of deafness, feeling inadequate, some anger, some guilt, some vulnerability, some confusion. What examples of these feelings did you hear? Anybody? Feel free to put. Did you hear any of those feelings come through in what she was saying?
I think everything came through.
It did. She felt inadequate. She felt a bit of guilt that the time had gone on.
Yeah.
She was confused. She had no idea what lower frequencies and high frequencies were or what a profound hearing loss was. And guilt.
Care is just confusion. She also says confusion is one thing she saw or heard.
She did. So now we're going to hear, though, another mum's story, and I want you to think about those feelings again, if they're apparent in here. One mum's story after she had newborn hearing screening, so a different tale.
Was born profoundly deaf. Diagnosed after failing his newborn screening at 2 days. He was diagnosed as profoundly deaf at 8 days. I just cried and cried and cried. After researching, and thank goodness for the internet, I sort of thinking of those of you with older children and just how isolated you must have felt. I felt isolated and I was on the computer all of the time, babe in arms, just trying to get some information in. It must have been awful to have been to not have that facility available to you at that time. And after much researching and reading everything I could possibly get my hands on, we decided straight away to start signing with Zed and to use cue to speech and anything really, and obviously all the normal sort of gestures and whatnot that go with it. He got his first hearing aids when he was 5 weeks old and has worn them, although he hasn't wanted to, he has worn them every minute of every day.
We have some input before, maybe we Barbara from Germany, from Hanover, she says feeling incompetent as a parent. And then we have a very, very long comment from a lady from Kyrgyzstan. I don't know, should I read it or should we put it for later? It's a very long comment.
Is it possible to summarize?
Okay, I try.
Thank you.
Why does the speaker say communication involves both the brain and the heart? Well, why maybe you want to answer this question first of all. Why does the speaker, you remember you said some people say you don't listen with your ears, but also with the brain. And then you got interrupted and somebody said, but you listen also with the heart.
Yes. Yes.
And then it said, well, parent behaviors were linked to strong language outcomes in children. Who was leading the conversation? Well, she's just repeating this.
Thank you.
How old was Fergal? You said it. Fergal was implanted very early.
Yes.
Thank you. You repeat, when was he implanted?
Thanks. He was implanted when he was 7 months old.
7 months, yes. What factors supporting? Okay, I think we talked about this. What supported his progress? Why is consistent use of processor considered important? No, because he doesn't hear without the processor. It's pretty clear. What did the family do at home to support Fergal's language development? We also answered this question already because we said they do more of what you do with a hearing child.
Yes. Very creatively. And the point about listening with your hearts was somebody making the point to me that, yes, we have to listen with our ears, we have to listen with our brains, need to be processing the signal, but heart always needs to be at the heart of communication. So back to listening to Zed's mum after early screening and you heard a lot of this coming out about the vulnerability, the confusion, at that very early stage, which is so hard for a very new parent. If you think about being a new parent, you haven't had any sleep, you are really rather shocked at the time anyway, your baby hasn't even started to feed properly. What a lot you have to take on. So the impact of parents of diagnosis and thinking about implantation is a big one. And parent reactions, as David Lutterman says, is to be a parent is to be scared. Anyway, you take home this tiny little baby who's dependent on you. And now somebody tells you that this child is deaf. To be a parent of a deaf child, it's not what they expected. And these are the phrases you get. We didn't feel like talking or laughing, which is so important for a newborn baby, communication. I stopped talking, laughing. How terrible for a new mum. Just quiet, there was no point. But parents need to be relaxed to be good communicators, and those early good communications is at the heart of good development. But what do? Often professionals, we give lots of advice about what you should do. In the UK, you'll be told there's auditory training, auditory verbal therapy, natural oralism, cued speech, sign bilingualism, total communication, sign-supported English, gestures, structured oralism, maternal reflective method, British Sign Language. Well, one dad said to me, "Won't someone please let me communicate with my child?" So parents sometimes get lots and lots of advice and so much to take in. They get lots of technical advice. Hearing aids, ear molds, the technology and babies isn't easy to handle. Then we start to explain the audiogram. And people say, parents have said to me, "I don't understand a word. Why is she talking about a banana?" Because when we look at the audiogram, sometimes trying to make it easy, here we are talking about the speech banana. And parents who've been hit with all this new knowledge at a time when they're very vulnerable, confused, tired, this is very hard to understand. and lots of technical language about cochlear implantation and medical language. Well, we'll do an MRI under a GA tomorrow. What does that mean? We'll do an ABR under sedation. There's lots of ossification, but don't worry. There's been a CSF leak, but don't worry. Then maybe a discussion on genetics. Well, that's hard to understand for anybody. And we expect parents to make an informed decision. We ask them questions. What do you want for your child? What are your goals? Why isn't your baby wearing their hearing aids all the time? Well, as one mum said, you try breastfeeding with a child who's got with their keeping the hearing aids on. How do parents really share what they feel? And in our world of deafness, hearing loss, hearing aids, cochlear implants, many professionals around the family are there advising, but they may have differing goals. An audiologist, cochlear implant surgeon, pediatrician, teacher of the deaf, social worker, educational psychologist, speech and language therapist, clinical psychologists. In your country, they may have different names, or you may have different ones. The audiologist may have different expectations and hopes to the speech and language therapist, for example. The cochlear implant surgeon may be just aiming for successful surgery. What are the parents to think about all this? As David Lutterman said, this is a phrase for life: when emotions are high, cognition is low. When your emotions are very high, then actually your brain power is quite low, and it's not a good time to be making decisions at any time in your life, because the diagnosis brings a change to an adult self-concept. It's not the baby they're expecting. They need time. They need to meet other parents. And there can be dangers when the technology drives the agenda and decision-making, because we do know we need to communicate. We do know the earlier implantation takes place, the better.
So I just want to interrupt because Barbara Esselading made she wrote into the chat, which is really terrible. One mother told me that the early intervention specialist told her that her child has snails in the ears, and this is why she can't hear.
Gosh.
Early intervention specialist told her, the mother. Can you imagine? Early intervention specialist talks about snails in the ears.
Can you imagine what's going through that mum's head as she takes her baby home?
Yeah.
Yeah,
she misunderstood cochlear for snails, yes, but
Right.
when you use the word snails, of course, everybody understands this little animal, no?
Yeah, I think having interviewed parents over the years, ingrained in their mind are some of the things they've been told, and it sticks with them, the guilt. There may not be time to deal with the emotions and make the adjustments to come to terms with the diagnosis. And the most important thing that parents need to do in the first early months is bonding with their child, parenting with a process. And in fact, the child's later social and emotional development really depends so much, as we know, on those early months. Dealing with the technology itself can get in the way. Audiology places, clinics aren't natural places for infants and families. That's not where you expect to spend your time. Too much information too early can confuse and reinforce feelings of inadequacy. How much can people understand or take in? How can we help them make informed decisions? Well, David Lutterman here suggests they need some time and space.
What I found was, giving information to somebody who is emotionally upset and is not prepared for it is useless. Not only is it useless, what it tends to do is it tends to overwhelm. It tends to increase their feeling of inadequacy and scares them even more. What they need is somebody who will be able to listen to them and validate their experiences and give them some time and space.
Some time and space. And David Lutterman recommends if you take good care of the parents, the children will be fine. And start where the parents are, not where you'd like them to be. When professionals appear all knowledgeable, super confident, we know, then it can diminish parents. And they're the ones who are going to be parenting this child. You can't go faster than the parents ready to go. Parents need other parents. And he suggests that parents are smart and will choose well if given a chance. Now, I find this diagram interesting. Parental and Family Support from the Time of Diagnosis to Infinity by John Atkins. Now, John is an accountant, so he's a very clear thinker. D for diagnosis, I for implantation, and here, infinity. I told you he was an accountant and a mathematician, but here he is. This is what he says parents need. Emotional support, and at first, great quantities of it, but then look where he puts it. This dad who's an accountant, he recognizes he needs some sort of emotional support for infinity. They need access to information, and they need decision-making tools that grows over time. Because if you have a deaf child, making decisions is not just at the beginning, but carries on. And I found that a really useful way of thinking about what sort of parental and family support we're offering. So for professionals working with parents of deaf children, we are faced with the issues of providing non-professional counselling. We're not professional counsellors, but some aspects of our work, we have to have some sort of counselling skills. Chris English over there used to run some counselling courses with me and has just produced another book about counselling for audiologists. She divides it into two. Information counselling, helping parents problem solve, make changes, the things they have to do, but also their personal adjustment counselling, just helping parents acknowledge their feelings, giving them some time when it's needed. And when do we do which? Goldman, in that wonderful book, Emotional Intelligence, suggests the thinking mind versus the feeling mind. And Chris suggests that we need to listen with our third ear to know whether we're thinking about informational counselling or we're thinking about personal adjustment counselling. It's useless when a parent is just needing a bit of time to adjust, giving them huge amounts of information and technical information. Give them time and they'll be really ready for it. So I've talked a lot about the early years, but we also need to think about the long term. Recently, at one of our kicker conversations, a parent said, attention's rightfully given to children with hearing impairments, but it's crucial to remember that they grow into young adults and eventually adults who also require support. Now, this graph along the bottom here, then we have years, the current age, and we're trying here to show the number of children with cochlear implants, but by the age they are now, not by the age that they are when they were implanted. So we think a great deal about this end, the early years, and so much less about this end, when the children are over, say, 8. Because if you have a look, so we think about early intervention, we think much less about this group. And if you can see, so 50% of these children are over the age of 14. 75% are over the age of 8. Yet we concentrate a lot of our time thinking about early intervention with parents. What about parents and listening to parents of this group? Because their issues don't go away. And a lifetime's hearing journey needs lifetime support. We think about the time in the clinic fitting the cochlear implant, learning to use the technology. How much do we think about this out in the community? When the child and the parents, we need to listen to them to provide what they need. By the way, Monica, if anybody puts anything in the chat room.
No, I'm watching.
Perfect, thank you. And feel free to put a comment in from your own experience if you wish. That would be really helpful. But what do parents say is their major challenge when you ask them and listen to them? This is typical. My child had an implant in an excellent centre. We're fighting for a suitable education. In fact, children spend, of course, majority of their time in education, and it's not new. Anne Gears and Jean Moog said in 1997, the long-term management of cochlear implants is by teachers. Hasenstadt, educational services woefully inadequate. Sorkin and Swollen, parents' difficulty accessing services. Sage and Wines. Education emerged as the major issue in their interviews and a fight for services, arguments with teachers. A European-wide study that we did, training for local professionals was by far the most common issue, especially in mainstream, teachers, classroom assistants. The early support that the children were getting was not continuing. New teachers needed better training, and they also should have links with the Cochlear Implant Centre. Too often we have the Cochlear Implant Centre functioning, programming, managing the implant, but in actual fact, the child's spending more of their time at home and school. Here are parents again. Most day-to-day supports from parents and teachers. They need to be well informed and not think that their child has a snail in their ears. It's assumed that because he wears a cochlear implant, his hearing is normal when it's not. You hear that time and again. Mm-hmm. Because cochlear implants work so well, these children sound as if they have no problems. Sometimes I feel that cochlear implants work too well. We've had to fight for everything, a huge battle. These parents, so they've had all that at the early days, and here as it goes on through their child's schooling, I have to fight for the rights of my son constantly.
So when I have a question, when parents say I have to fight constantly and still and so on, does it mean that they have to fight for the child to be admitted to a mainstream school?
Yeah, yes, it can be that they fight for the child to be admitted to the mainstream school. They have to fight for the child's technology to be managed in school.
Okay.
They have to fight perhaps for better acoustics in school, and so on. One parent said that the teacher had said, "Don't worry, it's fine. I keep the speech processor, and he has it for speech and language therapy."
Oh,
it's the sort of thing that they have to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about parents of deaf children with complex needs, and up to 40% of deaf children have another difficulty, when we interviewed them, for these children, their parents' education is a major issue, the major issue. But, another but, when we interviewed cochlear implant centres, education was their least important issue. So the professionals at the Cochlear Implant Centre didn't think that education was important. And again, when Joe Franklin interviewed parents of deaf, blind and complex children about their experiences with professionals, they were told the professionals didn't listen, the professionals disagreed amongst themselves. I love this bit. The reports they got were useless, too long, and some of the words, you can't even find them in the dictionary. Again, we're talking about complex information that parents are suddenly expected to understand. This is sad. You end up hating these appointments because sometimes you don't understand a word they're saying, and I find they're a complete waste of time. Again, listening to parents. What do they want? Well, they want the greater use of the local services, the local audiologist, the local teacher of the deaf. I should like more liaison between the Cochlear Implant Centre, so the specialist centre, and the local professional services. So the families gain benefit from the local services near to home, not to the specialist centre, rather than attend the implant centre on a regular basis. Another one, long-term cochlear implant uses a technical service that can be delivered via the internet remotely. Mm-hmm. Remote programming of patients saves time and money. Could be at the local audiology service near home and train those staff up to deliver the service long term.
We have a comment from Barbara.
Oh, good. Hello, Barbara. Thank you.
Parents with mainstream children tell me that they hardly get support from the schools of the deaf since their child is easygoing and others need more support.
Exactly what I've heard parents say too, Barbara. You know, if your child is, as you say, easygoing, well behaved, and of course, if the implant's working well, they will appear as if they have no problems. But they might, in a noisy environment, misunderstand, misinterpret, miss some instructions. So this was a result of a study that was published in 2014, so over 10 years ago. Remote programming saves time and money. People complain about the distance to cochlear implant services, but today we have incredible technology. It's available to do much of the work through remote programming, and parents want that.
But I would like to ask a question here, because I have the impression that the remote possibility, remote fitting, remote counseling, and so on, is still not as accepted and widely spread as I think it would be useful, because we could have a much higher impact. I mean, you can be much more effective when you work remotely, as compared, of course, the therapist travels to the families. You lose valuable time. And the other way around, the parents travel with the child, or with a teenager, he travels or she travels by herself, but you lose time traveling. On the other hand, of course, as we sometimes say, it's still different when you meet people in person, when you are sitting together, as compared to remote. So maybe the solution should definitely not be remote only, but a kind of hybrid service.
Exactly. Yes, that was very well explained, Monica. And I think a big study we did, which was actually of adults, their ideal was an annual face-to-face. But then if you got to know somebody, you can do such a lot remotely, and is really requested. And the technology is there. And of course, the young people are are very up to using the remote services.
But here we have a critical comment from Barbara. She says, I think remote support needs experienced children, parents, professionals, and financing. I agree with the financing, but I don't think, I mean, that's my very personal opinion, that for remote support you need experienced children or parents. I think they are so, we say, affine to this remote communication, because they use their handies all the time. So I think times have changed here. What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I think, you know, little ones like Fergal at 3 is very happy to talk to somebody through his mum's phone. And yes, and there are plenty of videos and studies showing adults being more than happy to use their phones, use their remotes. You know, somebody who's at work, it's so useful for them.
And we have a comment, just a second. We encourage comments. So
Yeah.
here's Marcella Garrido. She says the majority of teachers who receive children implanted at an early age have difficulty understanding that these children do not hear normally, because it is actually difficult to notice if one does not have the appropriate information.
Yes, that I think that that many of our children are actually speaking so well that in the right context you can understand and put in excellent feedback, and hopefully that parents with early intervention work and with support are able to do that, plus mainstream nurseries would too.
I would just come back to the financing, because that clicks here in my brain. Barbara says we need financing. Do you have an idea, Sue, how to solve this problem? In our countries, Germany, Austria, and so on, I understand that the insurance company doesn't pay for the remote service. It was different during the pandemic, of course, but now it seems that financing is a problem. How do you solve this issue in the UK?
I think, as you say, it was very common during the pandemic, and less common now. But what we do find is that people are more and more thinking about it as the only way forward, because if you look at this graph, I'm looking here at children implanted per year, and this is the numbers that are implanted that need to be serviced, if you like, who are going to have problems with their devices and so on. So I think we do need and could have, it would be able to be developed, the actual evidence to show the cost effectiveness of remote services.
Yeah.
And when Kathy Berman in 2014 produced a study from Australia that she did about remote programming then, because of course in Australia with the distances, and they're used to the concept of, the flying doctor, of doing educational services over the radio out into the outback. So it wasn't as right. And what she found was that parents and patients were all keen to have remote programming. They loved the trial that they had, and it was the clinicians that actually were more cautious about it.
Same in Germany, yeah. And we have a comment from Sue Louise again, and she says, as a CI user myself, a hybrid to me is ideal, remote after building a relationship providing. There is a good quality, provided there is a good quality teacher of the deaf locally for children.
Absolutely right, Sue. Thanks. You and I, both as teachers of the deaf, would support that. When somebody can just call, the teacher of the deaf, the local speech and language therapist could call into the specialist centre, and then you're doing two things. You're not only helping the child, but you're helping skill up that teacher of the deaf as well, from the specialist centre to the local teacher. And that's the only way we're going to be able to manage these services, because not everybody will have a therapist, speech and language therapist. Not everybody will have a speech and language therapist in the long term, but every child has a teacher of some kind, and they need to know what they're doing, and that's perfectly possible. So I would just suggest, much of this is old. The argument is, we've been talking about this for a long time. I've said Kathy Berman's study was over 10 years old. But is education still an issue? And a recent Kicker conversation actually shows that it is. The implants can work too well. Children with cochlear implants often speak well. Teachers may not understand or be aware that the child may not have understood or misheard the information. And if Leona is still on the call, as she said, I found out that they really didn't take care at all. Just the child was there with no support. He was doing what the other children were doing, but he didn't know why, because he'd missed out on something. It looks great from the beginning, but it is not.
And by the way, Leona is from the Czech Republic.
Yes, and I'm actually going to show something more soon about her. So, and if we think about low and middle income countries, parents' voices there desperately need to be heard. And we've got a new Kicker project, because what do you think their major issue is? If anybody's going to say, I'm sorry, I'm getting aware of time, so I'm going to continue if that's all right. But do butt in or put something in the chat room, then we'll be able to see it and answer it later. Their major issue, which comes forward, is a huge one of funding. Selling their land and so on to raise money. Here's somebody from Armenia. Imagine living in a country at war, facing an economic crisis while trying to raise a huge amount of money so your child can hear. So listening to parents from low and middle income countries where implants may be donated, the surgery may be donated, but these parents have the rest of their child's life to think about. So with all those issues, what can parents do? What are they doing to make sure that their voices and that of their children are heard? Here's Peter Bowl. What he found helpful when his son started school was that they had a card that everybody in the school had. What were the priorities on the card? Introducing their son, introducing his problems, introducing what his actual needs were, and what were the priorities for him. We said this before, wearing it, not in the teacher's pocket, not put in a safe place, wearing it. The equipment working properly, checked every day, how to do it, where are the spares, how to use it. the acoustics of the classroom, using the new hearing in everyday life, becoming independent, making friends. All of these things and ideas were on this card that Peter made us essentially sure that all those dealing with his child in school had. Here's Leona, and you're going to hear about Leona, I think, next year with all she did. An amazing project with schools, universities, governments. These are parents actually making change happen, making sure that they're listened to, producing leaflets, workshops, highly successful, producing these leaflets for teachers of a child with cochlear implant, the whole range of staff in a school. You'll hear more from Leona in the PORA series.
Mhm.
Giovanna in Panama, look what they're doing. They're providing parents, organising mobile education reading, mobile hearing health tours, educational resources right across Panama, run and developed by parents. Tanya Saunders, her books for families, developed by parents for families with and without hearing loss. What are the young adults doing? Young adults making their voices heard. Cochlear implants have given them a voice. Excuse me. And they certainly want to use them. We're the first deaf group of young people with cochlear implants who are stepping into the hearing world. Listen to this. I've always heard through my cochlea. It's all I know. Without my implant, I can do nothing. That's a huge responsibility for us all. So they've published their agenda for change, asking for increased public awareness, accessibility, lifelong services. Cochlear implants have given us our voices. Just a few small changes could make life even better. So, sorry, got a tickle, but we're nearly there.
Maybe you want to take a sip of water.
I have just here.
Yeah, these are very, very moving expressions from the young adults, no?
They are. If you go on the Kicker website, you can see some amazing videos from them. As I say, cochlear implants have given their voices. But when you think about a young man saying, without my cochlea, I can do nothing, then I think that brings to us about how remote care has to be part of the package.
Mm-hmm.
If that young man is at work and he's really struggling, then to have his problem solved over the internet is the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I would just like to put a plea for putting the child and the family, of course, at the centre of what we do. And I think cochlear implant teams, and we seem to have been talking about this for a long time. Sue Lewis is here, but when I was at the cochlear implant team and she and her husband working locally, we certainly tried to put great links between the cochlear implant team and the local team of audiologists, teachers, speech and language therapists, and of course their parents, to ensure it was all the care was joined up. And what happened at the specialist centre was not divorced from what was happening in the child's daily life. That's just so important that the local people benefited from that and developed their own special skills to provide such wonderful support for the children in their care. So the family, the cochlear implant team, the local team working absolutely together. So they're not arguing amongst each other, and those parents having to make decisions get consistent support but are also listened to. And here's David Lutterman for the last time, and he summarises what he wants to do.
What we want to do is create that independent parent, the one who is willing to operate on their inner wisdom. Professionals don't know what's best for a given family. Professionals have information and skills that they need to share with them, the family. But the family then needs to be able to use what's going to work for them.
Thank you. So the family then it becomes empowered to be able to support their child and to advocate for what their child needs. One anonymous parent a long time ago wrote, When I asked you to listen to me and you start to give advice, you haven't done as I asked. When I ask you to listen to me and you're beginning to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you're trampling on my feelings. Even in your personal life, it's extraordinarily frustrating if you're complaining about something and somebody tells you that you really shouldn't feel that way and that everything could be worse and that you're really fine. They're not listening to you. And I think this is important. I can do for myself. Parents are very strong. I can do for myself. I'm not helpless. Just listen and just hear me. And if you want to talk, just wait a minute for your turn, and then I'll listen to you. And as David Lutterman says, then you've got a real team around the child. And finally, you would expect no less, Monica. I just want you to meet Kicker, our independent NGO, the CI International Community of Action, which we established after a global consultation with these goals to develop a global network of CI advocacy groups and individuals with opportunities to share activities and resources, to strengthen the user and the family voice, and to increase the access to the provision of cochlear implants and lifelong services. Because it's the lifelong services that seem to so often get missed. And that's what parents tell us, and that's what the young people are telling us, and that's what adults tell us too. We've now got members in 76 countries. Do join us, sharing our resources and providing places, safe places, or as safe as anywhere can be today, for our Kicker conversations about topics. And so driving forward change to support people. Plenty of free resources to support you. And our third global conference, where science meets experience, in Brussels this year in October, as Monica said, bringing together parents, children, young people, adults with cochlear implants, but together with clinicians, with teachers, with researchers, with industry, with politicians making those funding decisions about what is needed. So it's a different sort of conference. Do join us. And thank you for listening, and thanks to all of you there. And let's hope that we can make a difference listening to parents and developing the services that really work most effectively in the long term to make this transforming technology available and effective wherever the child is. And lastly, the PORA.
Thank you very much.
For your attention.
I just want to add a long comment. I think we have still time. So we have a long comment from Kyrgyzstan again, from the lady who wrote before. And I hope not too many people say thank you now, because I have to read it. As a person who also lives with hearing loss and uses a cochlear implant, this topic feels very personal to me. People often see only the technology, but behind it there is a whole emotional journey, fear, adaptation, hope, and daily effort. A cochlear implant can open the door to sound, communication, education, and connection with the world, but support from family, schools, society, and professionals is just as important. I especially understand the feelings of young people who say that their implant became their voice. Living with hearing loss teaches you strength and patience, but it also shows how important accessibility, understanding, and inclusion are. Stories like these remind us that every person with hearing loss deserves not only medical care, but also respect, equal opportunities, and the chance to be truly heard. So that's a very, very nice comment.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you very, very much.
Very
And
nice.
really, that's what Kicker is about. That's why, as Monica put it, we have such a range of people in there, so that at our Kicker conversations, we have industry and audiologists and listening to the users' voices to be heard.
And we have many thanks, of course, from very different people. And Yvonne also, she's still with us. Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you so much. She says, enjoying listening to you and interesting talks. listening with the heart. And then Ali also says, I'm afraid I need to leave. Thank you, Sue, for a great presentation, and Monica for hosting the webinar. Everybody is thanking. So great session, Sue. Thank you so much. And I think we have a last slide we want to show.
We do. I was just, yes, I do.
Yeah.
If you
And can somebody, I hope somebody did a screenshot. And here we have the last slide. Thanks for the attention, and please check out our new PORA areas and our website. So you can have a look on our digital hub on our website. You can find the calendar. And I know that the next session will be very different because it will be given, the presentation will be given in Russian, because the speaker will be Marina Gurieva from St. Petersburg. And I think the date is the 24th of June, if I'm not mistaken. So please have a look in our calendar and join us again. And of course, please, if you have any questions, comments, communicate with us, and we will make sure that Sue will answer your questions or respond to your comments. And with this, I say thank you very much to everybody, especially Sue, but also to my team, Katarina and Udo. Thank you for supporting us, and I'm looking forward to see you again next month with Marina Gurieva. And now to everybody, have a very nice day, have a very nice evening, and have a nice sleep. All the best to you wherever you listen to us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.